Hi, my name is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
So I have, I have a question about cryptocurrency and what the future of cryptocurrency holds for Ethiopia. And given the fact that financialization is being automized, and it's such an abstract concept nowadays, like what are we going to do to sort of leapfrog into the future of finance and create more possibilities for the population to work with economics without the traditional methods, as like the future is inventing new ways. And are we going to participate in that, or are we going to fall back on the traditional method of birr to dollar? Yeah, I don't know if that's my question.
Great question. Yeah, that's worth the clap. Huh? We're you know, that's the truth. We're falling far behind. You know, there isn't a single company that's been able to launch cryptocurrency. I'm certainly not familiar anyone in Africa. Certainly in Ethiopia. You know, it's you know, you know, we have to be realistic in the sense that this is why I was referring to earlier. You know, we're still a cash-based society. You know, when you walk around, you know, if you go to the corner of Radisson here, on the ground floor, you will find one of my ATMs that I installed years back when this started. You can do debit card. You can do cardless banking with that machine. It's all a smart machine. It does everything. You can go online and do your transactions. You know, for my kids, I pay online to the school, and it's great. I'm going to come to it. Yeah. So you see, so this process is huge when you have 100 million people. Building awareness, it doesn't matter what the technology is. You know, we have our flag carrier, Ethiopian Airlines. How many people are able to fly on Ethiopian out of 100 million? Not many, all right? So the reality is, you know, despite the speed of change in technology, we have not been able to pull the drug that is I call it a drug because a lot of the society is still back. You know, the majority of Ethiopians, for instance, they're small farmers living in their huts, and they're still, this is the first generation of farmers who are able to send their kids to school. You know, I commend some of the great work that has been accomplished, building schools, universities, colleges. I think we are now state-owned. We're 60 plus state-owned universities in Ethiopia now. This is historical. You know, we have about 97% attendance rate for schools of the kids. So this is primary school. Carl, if you may need to correct me, but somewhere there, 97 for male students, I think. For female, it's a 93% or something like that. So again, you know, we're far from able to fly at Concorde speed to New York. It's you know, the economy here, the regulatory capacity, even for regular banking. Forget about, you know, most of the banks here in Ethiopia, for instance, they still do basic banking, you know, just regular saving, current accounts, and nothing else, no innovation whatsoever. You cannot take, for instance, you cannot take foreign investment into the financial sector. So there's a lot of restrictions. So this is one key issue. It's a very restricted market that we are operating in, so there's limited space to maneuver and to innovate. So when it comes to cryptocurrency, you know, this is going to be even the mindset in terms of to have the human resources, the capability to be able to regulate at that pace, will put the majority of the society at a disadvantage, the majority of the society. So only, I'd be surprised if you find 0.5% of society understands what cryptocurrency is all about. okay? Because we are still, the majority of Ethiopians are not even banked, okay? So even getting into a bank to be able to open a bank account, to have their pictures on it, sign on it, and to be able to deposit their, not, we have a whole lot of long journey to get to that point. That said, I don't, I do not subscribe to the idea of sleeping while the technology is getting ahead of us. So, I think, this is where the government plays its key role in terms of pioneering the key policies to be able to allow this kind of ideas to be incubated, to be developed, to have a proper complementary space so that whoever, be it 0.01% of society wants to be able to be engaged in something like that, there should be that playing field and the legal framework to be able to innovate in that space. I used to, while I was at ECX, I used to go to some of the universities to recruit youngsters, and I'm incredibly hopeful of the youngsters who are coming out of university. Their hopes and vision and capabilities and intelligence, they can do great things, especially in the technology space. I have great hopes in that space. So on the other hand, the policy framework needs to lead and create that incubation space so that we don't lag behind, okay? So, I don't know if you guys heard yesterday, there was this news about Zimbabwe wanting to launch a satellite to space. So it's, it's a great vision, space is a big industry, you have to build a whole, there's a whole lot of investment that goes into it, a whole section of industries that contribute to something like that. So it's not just about launching it, you have to sustain it. So it's, there's a lot of work that, but, I am really convinced that I think, especially in a country like ours, in Ethiopia, I think some 65% of the society is under the age of 25 or something like that. So we have great hope on the youngsters who are coming up, because they have to survive and they're going to fight hard to claim their piece of the cake. And I have great anticipation, but obviously there's going to be a lot of work needed by pioneering politicians to be able to create sufficient space for these guys to play.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you, Anies. The whole cryptocurrency idea, when speaking to, speaking to loads of entrepreneurs, from Richard Branson to some of them are successful entrepreneurs, they don't buy into the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But no matter what happens with cryptocurrency, Africa has to look into ourselves to empower our own young entrepreneurs to dictate what the next thing should be. We should stop always looking to the West for innovation, because Elon Musk came out with PayPal. We have someone from Kenya that came out with M-Pesa. We need to celebrate that success. We need to stop being quiet about our own successes. We need to celebrate people like that, because he should have been someone who was celebrated all across the world for being the first person that started a mobile app, because that in itself is a currency in itself. PayPal is its own bank without saying it's a bank. He created something like that. So we have to, if he can do that, imagine how many geniuses, young geniuses are out there that have the answer to this. Why the cryptocurrency thing is a major thing is that people find the currency market very, very complicated. How do you end up being the strongest pounds is strong today? In literally a space of a week, pound is weak. And then you look at all of that Forex exchange, and you look at that and you say, why doesn't Africa look into themselves and create something for ourselves? We are fully capable. I mean, we are fully capable of having the next generation of people that will say, listen, rather than cryptocurrency, why don't we create something that is purely African, from Africa, and is here to work for the continent? Because if we keep on being backed by the West and following the system that's on the other side, we're never going to break the chains.
Absolutely, yes. I think I agree fully. It's in case some of you don't know, very recently we've as a nation we've been struggling with a foreign currency crunch. It's one of those countries, you have 100 million people, and can you imagine, we import from diaper to, aeroplanes. So everything that we consume on a regular basis, we import. Now the consumption level has grown so much that our industries have not been able to flourish, and why I think we should give full support to Paul Kagame on the second-hand clothing policy. He's been fighting very hard to defend the textile industry in Rwanda, and the same is going to happen here because closing 100 million people, providing medicine for 100 million people. Everybody would like to drive a car, so you have to fuel the gas. So everything that we consume is being imported. So really, it's crypto is fantastic, but there's an old saying in Ethiopia. Do you speak Amharic? The Zinjeroa said, "Majemmaraya mekkameca'en." You know that? No. So the monkey, the monkey said, "First, take the needle from my butt." So it's the saying is that the monkey got into this thorny place to get some fruit, and there's thorn everywhere, and the friends came, and they were trying to pick it up from the clothes here, the skin, and they said, no, first take the one from my bottom, and then I'll take care of it myself. So the idea is really, we need to start to address the most burning issues for a young generation in Africa. We are importing far too many things. Everything. You look at every one of us have a mobile device. We're all imported. We fall into the trap of breaking our devices everywhere. Then we have to substitute that with a new one, right? Again, you're going to spend another $200-300 to replace that. So we're falling into this trap of consuming Western outputs, and we have no output whatsoever to sell back. Hence the foreign currency crunch, because now we are completely depending on imported goods. Even fueling our cars in Ethiopia, we are spending over $2 billion annually. So it's like crazy amount of money that we're not able to. Now we're not able to sustain that because the young generation is coming to fruit. They're trying to consume more, and our ability to buy is now restricted because there isn't enough dollar to buy more. Hence the black market, blah 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 blah, and all that. So really, I think cryptocurrency and keeping in pace with technology is all great. But we need to take care of our number one priority. Let's take care of education. Let's take care of infrastructure. Let's take care of policy, so that there's sufficient playing field for all the youngsters to move along and to be able to innovate into these great things of the future. Sorry, my friend.
Hi, my name is Victor. I would just like to put one small contribution into what we're speaking about regarding the thorn in the monkey's bum. Yeah. Before Africa can really make the transition that we need, there's a lot of political affairs involved that we're kind of dancing around, to be honest. And the easiest way to put this, for an economy to rise, we have to do less importing and more exporting. But then for that to happen, a lot of other countries, especially the Western countries, are going to suffer. So this is a political situation that the mere man in Africa doesn't really have much power to deal with. So I just thought I'll put that little contribution in there.
Yeah, it's a great intervention. It's absolutely. This is, a lot of Africans, especially our generations, the young ones, we forget. There has been 400 years of slavery. We forget 400 years of losing our souls. And that is the reality that we have to deal with. That has been instrumental in terms of dissecting Africa over the years. And now this is the first generation the first generation, I'm not saying we should dwell on it, and a lot of Ethiopians may not sympathize with this because Ethiopia has not been colonized. But you know, one of the great things that Obama did, and at the African Culture Center in Washington D.C., guys, if you go to D.C. and if you don't visit that facility, you're wasting your time. It really puts your soul in touch with the past 400 years of reality. So we're fighting with that. So political chaos in Africa didn't happen just like that. It's come onto us. It's been building up over. So this is going to take time. It's not going to happen maybe in our generation, maybe even not in the next generation. And it doesn't have to cost the Western mindset or the Western economy in any way. It can be still complementary. The Chinese did it. We can do it too. There's great opportunity here. It's just that we need to clean our houses, and we need to start to think forward-looking, not dwell in the past. But you know, there's great opportunity. Again, you know, in Ethiopia, for instance, with 100 million people, you don't even need to think about, you know, just import substitution alone. To have these resources to be able to use, you know, if we can generate the equivalent of 7 nuclear plants in Ethiopia, that's it. It's done. You don't have to think about nuclear technology at all. You just build the dam and that's it. You know, you generate. I was doing the calculation, and I think potentially there's $1.2 billion worth of revenue to be had from that power that's going to be generated. Okay, so that itself is huge. So by reinvesting, by being prudent on the way we manage our economy, and by having a much broader participation in the economic system, I think if Africa, even, you know, without having to export more, we can balance the economy. It's doable. We can create plenty of jobs. And now with the advancement of technology, all of that is, you know, I used to work with IBM when I was like 20 something years ago. And you guys know about the mainframes? Does anyone know? Does anyone know the mainframes? Yeah. And you know, the first time I went to visit IBM, I was at Hursley Park in Winchester. I don't know if you know, Winchester is south of England in Hampshire. And in Winchester, IBM hosted one of the largest lab in the world. And I was at that lab. And when I first visited that lab, there were mainframe computers to the end of your site, and there were robots managing the tapes. You know, the tapes, the old DVD tapes, it was managed by, no one was allowed inside. You have to program it, and the robot will go and pick up those tapes. Okay? And the power of all that facility that they had then is less than the processing power of what we have on this little device now. All right? And back then, you know, IBM used to provide British Airways with, you know, all the engineering data and all kind of stuff. So the technology is now in every one of us. And we, you know, obviously we are spending 90% of our time clicking on Facebook, and we're not being very productive, right? So it's, you know, the mindset, you know, again, we need to get out of that consumption, you know, consuming social media and being innovative and so on. So there's a lot of work to be done.
I completely agree with you, and it's a good question. My answer to that is that the Latin word for government is control. And we have to, you know what I like about what's happened in America with Trump? The most amazing thing that's happened is that nobody in America can ever say anything about African governance anymore. You cannot. You know, after you see Trump, there is no way you can speak about any president across Africa. The reason why I say this is to say, every country you go to, the political system is exactly the same. Just that the way it's done is different. Whether you go to Switzerland, who's embezzling all the money from Africa, whether you go to the UK with a country starting wars that shouldn't be happening, whether you go to America, every single country you have a political system that's doing things that doesn't appease this generation of normal consumers and normal day-to-day people. But most importantly, the change starts with us, the people on the ground. That's why I admire entrepreneurs. That's why I admire people that have the vision to start something, because they don't look onto the political system or the climate to start something. They just start. And what happens with the miracle and the magic of entrepreneurship is just starting. It starts with an idea. There is every successful entrepreneur will tell you they just went in and took the risk and just started. If anyone had to calculate what was going on here, whether people will come here today, or whether we should fly to Ethiopia, or whether someone should launch Facebook, nobody would ever launch anything. So I think for the next generation, we have to be fearless. We have to stop looking at the state, because it is historical. There's never been any government in the history that has been 100% dedicated to the people. It just doesn't happen, because human beings change. I mean, if you look at the story of Jesus Christ, Judas wasn't dedicated to Jesus. Let's be honest. So things change. Everybody will have, before you get into power, you're the nicest person ever. You'd be like, listen, when I get there, I'm going to do so much change. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then you get into power. Power sometimes can corrupt. But the difference between entrepreneurship is that you have to see people on a day-to-day, because your customers are your people on a day-to-day basis. And if they turn against you, you haven't got a business. So you end up being much more of a more humanist person, much more of a more personable person, because the more you're serving your customers, I want to see my customers successful, so I want to make sure that I'm giving them the value that they deserve. So I think we should forget about society, because sometimes the negatives, when we start lining up the negatives, it sometimes will bring in the fear for us to do the big things that we're destined to do. So we should leave the negatives and what's going on around us, and literally just plow ahead. And I think that's the only way people here in Africa can succeed in a major level. Just think of major projects, but don't look at everything, the climate and everything that's going on, because that to me is a distractive mentality. My whole thing is tunnel vision. You have to have that dream to understand and take the action, like you said, and rather than spending a lot of time on social media. We're having the same issues in the West with social media, where a lot of people now are having what they call ADHD, attention deficit disorder, because they are literally spending 90% of their time on social media. So they literally cannot focus or sit in one place or even do anything for a long period of time. And that will affect the next generation, because I think Denzel Washington said, what's the long-term effect of too much information? So that will be a problem that's happening in the future. People cannot see that now, but that's going to be a problem that happens, because your brain shouldn't be taking that much information. You shouldn't have 2,000, 3,000 friends. It's not normal to have 3,000 friends. And there was a time where we knew our friends' birthdays. Now Facebook needs to remind us. There's a time where we knew our friends' mobile numbers, but now we have something to remind us. There was a time where we knew historical facts, but we have Google to tell us. So we need to now, especially in Africa of all places, we need to now tap into our natural resources, which is all here. We've been blessed with the natural resources, and when we tap into it, and don't be scared at all. You're going to achieve massive things, especially here in the continent. And everyone who's done that has achieved massive things in the continent. Any more questions? More questions at all?
My name is Tamrat. I just would like to ask you practical question actually. Right now, you mentioned in Africa, related to finance, how the banks are ready to give finance, or finance different projects, especially small and medium businesses. How it is practical? How you help to connect global business to Africans? How you help you mentioned foreign currency deficit, not only in Ethiopia but other African countries. So how are you able to connect big financial institutions to finance the African banks? What kind of mechanism, models are you already developed? If not, how you communicate these kind of things through your media, through your different platforms to bring those kind of finances, to bring change? Theory-wise, we want Africa to be united, but even different embassies are existing in Africa, including ECA in Ethiopia, Economic Commission for Africa. But what kind of contribution they have really done to the ground? Even AU is existing in Ethiopia. There are a lot of rules, regulations to empower the youth, doing this, doing that, a lot of Even Ethiopians, a lot of youth do not know where it is. They are not participating. All, even the city in Addis Ababa, it is located in Addis Ababa. How many of us have ever visited or participated in that kind of events? So nobody knows they exist here as a simple. So more than even mentioning like the slavery or the other issues, Africans, like most of the time, more like dominated or take advantage of by their own peoples, their brother or sisters. So how we come up a solution to overcome those kind of issues practically? If what kind of mechanism are already available platforms? How we get information, like our sister coming from the U.S. Embassy? What kind of like platform they like create to make themselves like public sites for like the PR or whatever you mentioned earlier? Thank you very much. Sorry.
So good, Tamrat. Very good question. So I think Tamrat is directing that to you, but so that I help you structure it a little bit, I wanted to make sure there's sufficient understanding of the financing mechanisms. It's there are very selected means of sourcing finance. Okay, selecting whoever has access to finance will have an economic opportunity. And whenever you have an economic opportunity, it becomes a policy issue. Okay, policy means politics. Okay, so Africa has a long way to be able to master that kind of mindset in politics and economics and so on and so forth. Okay, that's in terms of the regular channels of financing. There's a typical channel that is available in Ethiopia. For example, for our case here in Ethiopia, there's only one channel, and that's from the bank. There's nothing. Of course, we have the informal channels, a coup, a dir, and so on and so forth. There's another traditional mechanisms that we use, but that is it. This is, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or whatever out there, the World Bank, IFC, they don't offer anything that is not endorsed by the policy makers in this country, right? So here in Ethiopia, now there's a glimpse of opportunity coming through what we call the private equity firms. And these are private equity vehicles that have been set up overseas, and they have an incubation fund or some sort of an investment fund structure, and they look out for well-to-do businesses, typically startup businesses that are categorized as greenfield projects. They're very uninterested on that. They're interested on opportunities. Like, you'll have, a few years ago, Heineken came into the country. They acquired, Harar Bira and the others. They put in some money, and now, you have Walia and the rest, and they're obviously making nice, fantastic sales they've created. Why did they do that? Because this is what they do. That is the business. Okay, it's not Africans taking advantage of Africans or anything. It's a business. If you go to the US, 1%, less than 1% of the United States capital is controlled by they're controlling 90%. 1% of, less than 1% of the society is owning 90% of the capital in the US. Okay, so who's taking advantage of who? So it's business. There's, so it's just how well we are able to adapt, how well we are able to create investable projects, so that we are able to attract, hopefully the private equity firms are coming in. Potentially we're going to have more competition, more investment is going to come. You just have to be ready to be invested upon. Okay, but outside of that, there's obviously the regular channel, banks, and so on and so forth. Okay, but maybe Jordan.
No, I completely agree with you, Enes. But one thing is a great question. One thing I would say, I'll give an example of America. I'll give you an example of America. Not America today. America for the past, say, 100 years of America. What they did was the biggest branding exercise that any country in the world has ever done. Because I remember when I was growing up in Africa, all I wanted to do was to go to LA. I wanted to go to America. From school, college, and why did I want to go to America? Why? That's the question we have to ask. Because they did the best branding exercise ever.